Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio. This is Charlotte Canyon, and I'm the author of the book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, How to Parent Your Parents. And it's my pleasure this evening to interview author J RUSZ, and he goes by JR. How are you this evening, JR?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Welcome to our show. I'd like you to tell a little bit about yourself before we get into your book. Tell us about your family or a little bit of something that people may not know about you.
Well, I'm a native Ohioan, despite the fact that I'm writing a book about Texas. I've been in Texas, though, since 1977, when I got a job at the University of Texas at Austin. I spent 40 years there as a professor of literature and writing, and I'm now retired and writing a mystery series.
Very good. And the title of your book is?
It's The Window Trail, a Big Bend country mystery.
And now, have you been in Big Bend a lot?
Oh, I have. I got to Big Bend for the first time in 1972. And driving down there, I said, one of these days I want to have a place here. And I bought a house in south of Alpine, Texas. I think it was in 2004. So I've been here about 15 years, going back and forth between Austin and Alpine.
So you want to say you're kind of an adopted Texan?
I'm definitely adopted Texan. My roots in Ohio are still there, but I feel like a Texan. And when I go up to Ohio, people say I talk like a Texan.
So you've been here long enough that it's picked you up. Well, tell us a little bit of why you wrote the book, The Window Trails.
Well, I spent all my life as a writer of academic works, academic articles, of course, but also a long series of textbooks. I think I published my first textbook in 1980. And I had two new editions of textbooks come out this year, 2018 and 2019. But in retirement, I'll still be doing the textbooks, I guess, as long as students are using them. But I wanted to try something very, very different, totally different. And I've had the idea for this book. I think I took the pictures on the window trail at Big Bend National Park in 2004. And I said, this would be a great place for a murder at the end of the trail there. And it took a long, long time, obviously, for the book to develop, and I wasn't writing it the whole time, but I kept developing plot ideas and so forth. And started writing it seriously about 5 years ago, but I was so busy teaching and everything, and my other books, that I couldn't really sit down and begin to write until about 2 years ago. And then it just came.
And then it just came to you. I have to ask most authors that I talk to, do you use any of your family members or students you met that kind of form the characters?
Well, that's a really good question. One of my lead characters is based on a graduate student. And some of the other characters have characteristics, obviously, of people I know. But the amazing thing when you write fiction for the first time is watching your characters develop independently, not only of your conception of them, but almost as if they're real people. And so they may have started based on somebody else, but they become their own characters very, very quickly.
Right. And I noticed that that's what you taught at the University of Texas. You taught literature. You taught people how to write.
That's right. I taught people how to write expository writing. My expertise was in Shakespeare and in rhetoric. And rhetoric is public argument, public discourse, explanation, and so forth. I did not teach fiction. So it was new to me when I wrote this book. Essentially, at one point I tried to write an academic novel, but it didn't work. I didn't like it. I didn't do anything with it. But I'm a great fan of mystery novels. It's how I relaxed for 40 years. And I loved regional fiction. series of books that were about a place. My favorite author is Tony Hillerman of mystery novels, and Tony Hillerman wrote wonderful books about Navajo country and introduced that country, those areas of the world, to a lot of readers who were just totally unaware of what Arizona and New Mexico and Utah were like. And I enjoyed those books so much that eventually I got to the point in saying, I might want to try to do this. And if you live in Southwest Texas, far West Texas, it is a distinct place. It is a real region that more people need to know about. And it's unique, original, fascinating, rich. And I said, if I can't write books about this place, would I write about Cleveland? You know? And so that was the inspiration for the project. And I was thinking right from the beginning of the series, because all the books I really loved in the genre series. Hillerman wrote, I think, 15 or 16 novels. Margaret Cole is another one of my favorite writers. She wrote about the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, and just, you know, marvelous books. She wrote the last book of this series about 2 years ago. It just broke my heart that there weren't going to be any more. But you know, I don't know how long I'll be able to do my books, but I'd like to do a series about the region to capture the spirit of the region.
Yeah. Was there anything that surprised you about writing this fiction?
Well, I think it was what I've already mentioned, how the characters take over, that they begin driving the process, and you begin to having great affection for at least some of the characters. You have villains, obviously, in mystery novels and so forth, but the lead characters are people you genuinely have to like and enjoy watching them, and quickly you find yourself saying, oh, he or she would not do that, or he and she ought to be in this situation. And I was really, I've heard writers of fiction talk about their characters coming to life, but I didn't believe it until it was actually happening.
Till it happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you said you'd like to continue to write. Have you thought ahead of, like the next book and the next book and the next? I mean,
yes.
How many do you think you want to do?
Well, I don't know how many I want to do ultimately. I know where the series would have to end at some, what the last book would have to be about. But I was aware in writing the first book, I was setting up elements for the second book. And now the second book is almost done. And it is filled with elements that lead to the third book. I'm not into the fourth book yet, but you really have to plan ahead. Things cannot be a surprise for the readers of a series. Some characters are obviously going to be new, and events change and so forth, but there have to be things in the first book that lead to the second book, and the second book that lead to the third. So I'm in my mind now, I'm plotting the third book, because the second book is all but done. And I outline my books. And so I knew the shape of this book before I started writing it. All the elements were in place, everything would happen on a given day and so forth. And that'll be the next step. After I finish this book, I will outline the third book. But
well, that was something I was going to ask you. Since you were a professor, do you detailedly outline everything that's in your book before you start writing the chapters?
For my academic books, for my textbooks, textbooks are really an exercise in organization and structure. And so they are rigorously outlined. You know what's going to be in every chapter and so forth. And at this point, I've done them so long that I can handle that very well. First book, The Window Trail, was mostly in my head. I worked with a calendar. You have to have a calendar. And I had a calendar to keep the dates straight and so forth. And you even have to pay attention to things like, is the moon shining that night? I remember the Shakespeare play where the characters are doing the Midsummer Night's Dream. The characters who are going to do the play going to have the moon on stage, and they say, find moonshine, check out moonshine, make sure the moon is going to shine that night. Well, you have to do that when your characters are out in a physical place, outside, at night. Is there a moon there? So you find details like that are really quite important. And gosh, the web is so helpful now. You can find what the moon phase is on any given day and so forth. The second book, though, I outline much more rigorously. Not just a calendar, but a calendar filled with all the details of everything that is going to happen on that day and how it parallels to what other characters are doing. It was quite complex, but when it was done, I had a sense of the whole that I didn't have in doing the first book. The first book, in a sense, probably took me 4 or 5 years of writing, even though it started in 2002. This book is almost done, and I've been working on it for 7 or 8 months. So the process is compressed.
Well, we can learn a lot from you because of your expertise as a professor, and I know that a lot of our listeners are writers as well. Where would you suggest they start if they've got a book in their head?
I would say this, that as a professor and academic writer, what skills I bring is to writing a novel is simply a good knowledge of the rules of grammar, mechanics, and usage. Almost everything else about a novel is different from the kind of writing I've done. From the creation of characters, the shaping of a plot, the integration of those two elements with an environment. The place is so important, particularly in the kind of novel I'm doing, a regional novel. The most satisfying thing to me so far is people who have lived here in West Texas all their life are saying, you got the place. You've described it in a way that means something to me. But that doesn't come from academic writing. We don't do that kind of description. We don't do dialogue in academic writing.
That's probably true. Well, JR, we're getting ready to go to a commercial, so I want everyone to stay tuned to Indie Beacon Radio, and we'll come back with J RUSZ and the Window Trails, and he'll tell us a little more about the new book coming up.
I am Grace Allison Blair, an award-winning author, motivational speaker, and modern mystic. I have combined spiritual and psychological principles in my nonfiction self-help books under Grace Allison and fiction books under Grace Blair. Go to modernmysticmedia.com to find Do You Have a Dream? 5 Keys to Realize Your Dream, and my novel, Einstein's Compass, a YA time traveler adventure.
Love to read? Love to meet authors in person? Then check out bookfestival.network to find a book festival in your region of Texas. We are adding book festival events throughout the year, so sign up to get notices and even a coupon towards purchase of a Texas author's book. Sign up at bookfestival.network.
The war has ended, but the memory lingers on. Has been written by Helen Monday and Christian Gutling. A story of a Dutch secret agent under German occupation, highlighted drama, and then the British rescuing him and teaching him how to navigate the Fairey Swordfish airplane. This book can be purchased on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles, written by Helen Monday and Christian Gutling.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
This is Charlotte Canyon, and we are speaking with J RUSZ. He's the author of The Windows Trail. JR, I had one other question I wanted to ask you about your book, and I'd like you to expound on it. You touched a little bit on how you come up with the characters and that they take a life on their own. Can you give us maybe a little excerpt from your book and tell us about the lead character and who he is, a little bit of his background, and kind of intrigue us to want to read your book?
Well, the series is really built around 2 lead characters. The sheriff of Brewster County, Clayton Shute, and and a young professor, assistant professor at Sul Ross State University, Claire Hart. And Clayton is relatively young to be the sheriff, and the first book explains why that happens. And Claire is kind of in the middle of Texas. She's a native Ohioan, coincidentally, who is kind of trying to find herself at Sul Ross, which is a small university away from everything. And of course, what happens is the two of them find each other and get drawn into a murder mystery when they find a body. And that's sort of the beginning of the story. And needless to say, they become good friends, and we watch their relationship grow in the first book. And that's a story that will continue throughout the series. So I wanted to have two very appealing, relatively young figures, very different backgrounds. Clayton being a native Texan and Claire being from another world entirely. Clayton interested in the land. He comes from a ranching family. Claire is an academic. I know the academic world very well, so I'm able to write that part of the story. But I thought the dynamic between them would carry not only this book, but a whole series of books, because they both have interesting families who are going to play a role. Claire has a very intriguing mother who we only see on the telephone in the book so far. At some point, I'll probably have to bring her to Texas, but right now she's mainly concerned with the fact that Claire is 34 and not yet married.
And who knows, there might be romance.
Oh gosh, yes, there is romance. There is romance.
Romance in your mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. I like mysteries that are intriguing and insightful and suspenseful, but I don't like books that don't have characters that you can enjoy, that you'd like to have as neighbors. And that's kind of what this series is like. One of my favorite mystery series, although it's not really a mystery series, is Alexander McCall Smith's the #1 ladies detective agency. I don't know if you know the series, but it has gone on for years and years and years. And when you finish the books, not only do you enjoy the stories, but you feel good. And that's how I want my readers to feel at the end of my novels, that the experience has moved them and in some respects made them happy.
Okay, and you want to intrigue them though to anticipate the next book coming along.
Oh, absolutely.
And speaking of the next book, where do you intend to take the characters, and when do you expect that book to be released?
Well, one of the features of the book is in the title. Will always be one of the trails at Big Bend National Park.
Okay.
So the Window Trail is a very famous trail of the park. It's only superseded in fame by the South Rim Trail. Second book is the South Rim Trail.
Okay.
And of course, some of the action occurs at the South Rim, although elsewhere in the park and elsewhere in the region. At some point, I may go beyond that, since the far west Texas is such a rich area, so many different places, that I may not limit myself to the titles. But right now I'm thinking a trail per book, and that trail becomes a part of the story. It's not the entire story by any means, and it isn't the case even with the Window Trail that goes all over the Southwest Texas region.
Now, you mentioned the first one has a murder mystery. Are they all going to be murder mysteries, or have different suspense type things?
Well, it's going to be different kinds of things. The genre almost requires a murder, but even this in the second book, kind of my theme is not all mysteries are murders. There is a murder in the second book. I will say that, and it's a pretty interesting one. But there are a lot of elements in that new book, plot lines, that are not necessarily criminal, but we become interested in what's happening to the characters as a result of various developments in their life. and all the plots come together. I love complicated plots that kind of surprise you in the connection. In The Window Trail, there are two main plots, and it's not till the very end that you see how they come together. The second book has maybe 3 or 4 plots, one or two main plots, and it will end with all of them again coming together, almost in classic old-fashioned detective mystery stories where everyone gets around the table and all of the things are revealed at the end. Although there's no table, it's a pit fire on a ranch.
Yeah. What is some of your readers' comments on your first book? Because when it came out, what, last year?
It came out in July of 2018.
Okay.
And of course, I'm not used to receiving those kinds of reviews. That is, textbooks don't get reviewed. And the interesting thing about textbooks, of course, is students have to buy them. It's much more intriguing and challenging to have people who
buy a book because they want to.
and then when you see how pleased they are and what pleases them, there's no better feeling in the world, I think, for a writer than to have people say, "I loved your characters." Or, as I said earlier, people from the region saying, "I know this area. You've depicted it so well." I've had a number of readers talk about how moved they are by one of the final chapters in the book. I don't want to give it away, but I thought when I wrote it, when finished, I said, "This is a pretty good chapter." And to have that reaction from the readers too, they feel the emotion. And oh my goodness, that makes all the work worth it. I think a book like this or a series like this is ultimately a labor of love, and you want to make people happy for having read your book. And I've seen that they really like the characters too. It's almost as if the plot is. I've had a number of them say, "Oh, I figured the book out a third of the way through," but they actually haven't. Because there are things they couldn't know, but they want to continue reading because of the characters.
They want to find out. The only thing I know about Big Bend is it's where everybody goes hunts, especially my husband. Are you an avid hunter? Do you use any of that kind of genre in your book?
No, I'm not a hunter, but I'm surrounded by people who are, and at some point it may play a role. Big Bend is one of the most remote of the national parks. It's one of the hardest places to get to because you have to be going to Big Bend to get there. It's right on the border with Mexico, and it has mountains, it has a desert, it has all sorts of regions. It's a fascinating place, and a very, very big park. But unlike, let's say, the Grand Canyon or Zion or Yosemite, there aren't huge numbers of people there. So you can have this vast space to yourself in ways that you can never at the South Rim of the Grand Canyon, for example.
Right. Hold that thought, because we're going to take another commercial. This is Charlotte Canyon, and we're talking with J RUSZ about the window trails and all of his Big Bend adventures. That it sounds like he's going to have a whole series of books, and if you like murder mysteries or if you like mysteries, he's the author you need to read. Stay tuned.
What would you do if you found out everyone on the town council were thieves and murderers? That's what happened in Bandera, Texas in 1873. John Cruder was the marshal, yet he needed to operate outside the law in order to balance the scales of justice. He is the Midnight Marauder. You can find his books on Amazon.com and TopWesterns.com in paperback, digital, and audio. I'm Roy Clinton, and I hope you'll read The Midnight Marauder.
Indie Lector is a store for serious readers and indie authors. Find great talent at indielector.store and save money on books with their book club. A portion of the proceeds helps get books into schools and libraries in need. Find a great book to read by an indie author at indielector.store.
What started as a love letter to her son has become an international love letter for all parents to their children. Now you can read acclaimed author Shanalee Charbonneau's story to your children. When her son was very sick, she calmed him by singing her own song to him. She turned that song into the book, My Mama Loves Me, I'm Her Little Boy. She wrote 3 more magical books for all parents and kids 6 and under. Available at Indie Lecter, Amazon,
Ross. JR, I've got just a couple more questions because we've just got a few minutes left. You know, I know many of our listeners and probably many of your readers would love to know how to get in touch with you and where they might find your books. Can you give us that information?
Well, right now my books are exclusively on Amazon, both in a Kindle version and a paperback version. So that's the place to go. It's J RUSZ, R-U-S-Z. If they go to my textbook site, they'll see the real name is John J Ruszkiewicz, but that's much too long for a novel, so I shortened it for the Amazon publication. I must say I've really enjoyed doing an ebook and then my own manuscript, cover, and design and so forth. That's been a really intriguing process. I'm so used to having big publishers do my textbooks and marketing and so forth, that doing the self-publishing has been an intriguing and very, very satisfying experience.
Yeah, I find it as well. It's rewarding to know that you've got something, you know, that you've put together and you've designed.
Right, right.
Do you have a website, JR, that people could go to and, you know,
I do not have a website yet. I have the Amazon site, of course, but
okay.
I don't have a personal website yet for the project.
Okay.
We'll be working on that.
You'll be working on that, and you'll probably have it by the time the next book. And when is the new book coming out? And its title again was?
The second book will be The South Rim Trail, a Big Bend Country Mystery 2. And I'm hoping for a midsummer launch of the book. I will not go into print until it's ready, but the first draft should be done at the end of this month, which is February, and I suspect that the revision will take 3 to 4 months. If it takes longer, it will, but I'm aiming for midsummer of 2019.
Okay, so that's where you're actually wanting to get your book out. And now you said you've already put the plot and the outline for your third one. Do you have the trail chosen for it?
It's going to, yes, I'm not sure I want to reveal that, but it'll probably be the Lost Mine Trail.
Okay, you're just being a mystery all around.
Yeah, I'm going to have 2 crimes in that book, 2 major crimes, and the other one doesn't occur on a trail, but it might be too good not to use in the title. I'll see. That's that's the joy of writing a book. That's the fun.
That's the fun of writing a book. Well, if you had to give, say, one bit of advice to a new author, what would that be?
Oh, be steady about the writing. That is, write a little bit every day rather than nothing. Just keep at it. Do allow yourself time to think about the books. I do most of my plotting either driving or bicycling. And on those days, I sometimes will not write. But you really have to, writing is a matter of sitting down in front of that computer. It used to be the typewriter. I'm old enough to remember when it was the typewriter, and putting in a couple hours every day.
Okay, that's what, yeah, I was going to ask you. You spend several hours a day writing.
Yes, yes.
Well,
usually in the afternoon.
I actually have to handwrite it. I've just always done it that way, and then it goes in the computer.
I'll tell you, that was a very difficult transition for me because I used to write my books on legal pads, you know, these long yellow. And when the computer first came out, I said, oh my gosh, can I make this transition? And it took a while. It took a while because there was something, I understand that the physical relationship between your hand and that page is like drawing. It's not just writing, it's like artistry, drawing.
Right. Well, JR, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, and we want to thank you for joining our show today. This is Charlotte Canyon, your host, and I have one more thing for you to remember. A rose is like a book. You can't know its beauty until you look at it. And a book is like a rose. You won't know its full beauty until you open it. This is Charlotte Canyon. You have a nice day.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.